And once I understood that like you don't always have to have a beat with an intention and this and that and blah, blah. Like it's okay to not know. Once I understood that, it was so liberating. And at that point, everything changed for me.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
John Magaro is an actor. I sat down with him at his home in Brooklyn to talk about the work.
Is there a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character?
I don't have a process. As I was talking, is there a typical way? It's varied. You got to think the way jobs come can be different. You can get a job the night before and you have to show up. So obviously the way you're going to get into that job is going to be very different than when you're cast months in advance, or you just simply read a script and you're attached to a movie and you have no certain launch time when it's actually going to be filmed. So specifically, I don't think there is one. Ideally, if I have time, I like to open a dialogue with the director. I really enjoy directors sending me stuff like books or artwork or songs or films that are inspiring them. Sometimes I find, at least for me, that more valuable than trying to have a conversation about the script. We were just talking about this. At times, directors can over-explain things. And I think when you start to talk about a script, especially if they're the writer of the script, they have their own vision of this. And when you're focused on that, it becomes muddy and it becomes strange. But if you look over there at my bookshelf, there's books that are from director. I mean, we can go over. You want to walk over there?
Yeah.
Can we move?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But it's just things that they send you. I find helpful. This is from a movie I Did Not Fade Away, and it's just a picture book about musicians, right?
Yeah.
Cooking books that I got for First Cow that are just cookbooks, basically, the Food Journal of Lewis and Clark. Right?
Yeah.
So that's just a cookbook.
Yeah.
But this I find inspiration in that.
I heard you talking about that. You started to just make all these stews.
Yeah, so I just started making all these recipes from this book and working my way through it. And that's not your typical way of maybe, learning a role, but for me, that was my in for it. And anyway, so it's stuff like that. But sometimes it's also just pictures. This Keith Jarrett book, I just did this Keith Jarrett movie. And then obviously the concert, this Keith Jarrett clone concert record was very inspirational for that. I mean, it can come from anything. It can be, a lot of directors will send me music. I really respond to music. That's helpful. But like I said, also at times you don't, when I did Orange is the New Black, again, very different. It's a TV show. But I was cast the day before. And you just show up. And really at that point, you're just jumping in.
Right.
And I guess that's where kind of the school, the academic quality comes in, because you really just are relying on, skills tools that you might have learned, even though I'm not a big proponent of the academic side of learning theater or learning acting. I find it kind of silly to believe that you can learn how to do this in a classroom setting. I mean, certainly you can learn things, but you're not going to learn anything until you're, especially film acting, until you're on set. It's something that for some reason the traditional way of teaching acting is neglected. I mean, I think in my school I had one acting for the camera class and it was absolutely absurd. Wow. It was just ridiculous. Yeah. It was almost, you had to unlearn what was taught in this class.
Wow.
So the route is very different all around.
Yeah. But really, when you are making the stews
for First Cow, or listening to the music that a director sends, just break down, because
there may be somebody listening that are like, this is a different creature, artistic creature altogether. I don't get this. I don't get how eating stews can actually help you do the work that you have to do when Kelly says action. You know what I mean?
I think finding your inspiration or you're into a role, at least for me, is like something kind of clicks, right? So you're going down this road and you're trying to find the end of the character, and for me, because I don't know where that inspiration is going to come from, that's why I encourage directors to send me all this stuff that's inspiring them, because it might be a cookbook, it might be a song, it might be whatever, but something in me...
You're making your own stew inside yourself.
Kind of, basically. Like you're throwing all this shit in there, all these ingredients, hoping that something clicks. And quite honestly, sometimes nothing clicks. Sometimes it doesn't come from those things. Or sometimes it comes from something totally different that you find. But if you're lucky, these things that you're kind of putting into yourself as you're getting ready to do the role, if you're lucky, something will click. And the example of the stews for First Cow, I don't know what it was. I mean, yes, I had to learn kind of how to be a cook, but that's not necessarily required to play the role. I have a couple scenes in that movie where I'm sort of cooking, but it's film, so, you know, you can fake that.
Yeah.
But for me, something about the patience of making these recipes and the silence, being here alone, making them in quiet, just sort of like let something click in my brain that let me into the character of Cookie. Another movie I did, Not Fade Away, we were lucky to have a rock and roll like boot camp that Steven Van Zandt sort of championed, and David Chase, you know, put us through as we were making that. And that was taking drum lessons, and we were working together as a band. So that was a very, you know, that automatically got me into the character because we were becoming a band. And then at other times there's like a movie like Unbroken I did. That, you know, I didn't really have something coming from the director or anything like that to find that role in, but looking at pictures of my grandfather from World War II, when he was in World War II, sort of let something click, and I would keep those up in my trailer and found inspiration in that. So again, it can come really from anywhere. I think, you know, I was poo-pooing acting school, which we could have a whole conversation about acting school and, you know, the values and wastes of it. But what I found most valuable, and I think it's something that actors should live by, is that acting school gave me 4 years as an 18-year-old kid from Ohio, where there's no film, right? Not much acting going on. It gave me 4 years to immerse myself in reading and watching and listening. You know, I hadn't watched so many films. I hadn't read Chekhov. I'd read very little Shakespeare. I'd read no Ibsen, no, you know, all the greats. I hadn't, Brecht, who I idolize, I hadn't read. It gave me 4 years to do that. You know, every night my freshman year, I would watch a new movie, I would read a play. And that was outside of the classroom. That was just because I felt so behind when I went there. Like I came from a family where there's no creative people. My parents were teachers. So there was, you know, a value of education, but there wasn't a value of art necessarily. But I felt like so behind when I showed up at the conservatory that I was like, I have to read, I have to study, I have to learn this shit. And what that did is it made me realize the more you know, the more knowledge you kind of put into yourself, the better equipped you are as an actor. So I think that's sort of what translated into my process now of like trying to find inspiration from almost anything. I think that's where it comes from. Yeah.
Did you make a decision that you wanted to focus primarily on film work?
No. I figured I would graduate from theater school and I would work as if I was lucky, I would work as a regional actor. And that was it. Like I would work maybe I'd get lucky and get to work at like the Humana Festival, which I thought was really cool when I was in, and it is cool, but like I thought that or like working, And like maybe someday I'll get to do like an off-Broadway play, or maybe I'd make it to Broadway. Maybe like as some random role, like maybe that's like it.
Yeah.
But like primarily going around the country, because that's what I knew. You know, like where I grew up, we had regional theaters, and I was, you know, like my hobby was doing plays, right? Yeah. Even though I didn't have an understanding, I just, it was like something to do.
Yeah.
I didn't have this respect for what went into it. I was just like a kid who would get a play on stage, right? And there would be actors who came from New York, and would play the leads in these plays, right? And that's what I knew. Like these actors who lived in New York and went around the country and did, you know, summer stock basically.
Yeah.
You know, like did Much Ado About Nothing and Camelot and Rep basically. And that's what I saw. I had no knowledge about filmmaking. Like I said, there was one film acting for the camera class, which was, you know, these classes, and no disrespect to the teachers, they're lovely people and they're very talented, but they hadn't worked in the industry actively. And especially at that point, you know, this is the early 2000s where already filmmaking and television especially was changing. You know, you had The Sopranos in, you had this prestige TV thing happening. It wasn't the soap opera world and the network TV world anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what was kind of being taught, but again, by people who hadn't worked on film since probably like 1985. So how can you have someone teaching you acting for the camera in such an evolving world at that point? And even since then, look how much it's evolved.
Right.
How can they be teaching this craft when they don't really even know what's going on?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I'm a much more of a believer in the apprenticeship system, where you're there and you're in it.
Yeah.
You know, Jeremy Strong was really smart. He got out of Yale and was working, you know, on sets as a PA, was Dana Day-Lewis's assistant.
That's right.
You know, you're going to learn a lot more if you're surrounded by it. Even if you just go around with your friends and take a fucking camera and start making short films. That's right. You're already going to learn more than trying to sit in a classroom and do it. This isn't, you know, it's not calculus.
Right.
There isn't a exact science for it.
Right, and you're making obviously you're making a two-sided point there, because you did say that it was good that in school you were kind of forced to read plays, and then you want to read more plays. You know what I mean?
I wasn't forced. You know, we were forced. There was a few classes where you're forced to read a play. Yeah, but you're not forced.
You became curious.
I felt behind, and the competitive nature, which is something that I think pretty much every actor has, the competitive nature in me was like, I need to catch up. Like, I want to be the best at this. I want to know. I want to know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so that forced me. Meanwhile, there was tons of kids at my school who didn't do that. Like they wouldn't read. They wouldn't study. They didn't know what was going on. And quite frankly, those people are not in the business anymore.
Interesting. So so that's why I'm pushing back, because I guess I don't
push back, man. Go ahead. Push.
I guess I don't. I guess I don't want these people with all this experience that don't have like a foundation of what has come before, because when I'm saying with forced, I mean, like, you don't know, like, I didn't know I loved Dante. I saw Dante on your shelf. You know,
I should show you. I have the maps. I drew the maps.
Nice.
Of all three of them.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'll show you that later.
Even the Paradiso.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. But I'm saying, I would have, if I didn't have college, I was forced to read that. And it blew me away, changed my life. Like, I think it's the greatest art of all time, that thing.
Divine Comedy.
Yeah. And what has that done for me? I think it's always at play when I'm writing stories, right? What would that mean if all I had was experience, because I went right to experience, and then I only watched the things that I thought I wanted to watch? Because sometimes you don't even know what your taste is yet.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Right? Yeah. Until it kind of gets formed.
Yes.
And that's why I think an academic situation might be also on top of the experience.
I think yes, you're right. But the thing about an academic experience is it is what you make of it.
Yes.
And I think a lot of kids go to an academic program because they're told they have to.
Yeah.
They have to get a degree. They have to study. Listen, a lot of people can do it without it. There are plenty of actors out there who don't go and they just jump right into the business and they learn and they thrive and they do it. I wasn't that person. I couldn't have done that. For me, I needed to do it. But then there are other people who feel that they need to do it, go there and expect all this shit to be laid upon them and then to come out like an expert.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
You have to put in the work.
Right.
You like the Divine Comedy, that wasn't required reading. I picked that book up because I noticed in films I liked it was being referenced. And I was like, well shit, I should learn about this. So I read it in college and I loved it and I learned a lot and now like then I started to watch things, I'd see inspiration from it in things. But that's extracurricular stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
And you kind of have to do that in tandem with what you're being taught.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're not like, you can't just be like, the credits I'm taking are going to be enough to get me by.
Right.
Because it won't be.
And don't you think that this has a lot to do with you being a curious person?
Yes.
And that actually feeds your work.
I think the best actors, the best artists in general, filmmakers, writers, actor, whatever, photographers, anything, are curious people.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would go into this miserable industry.
I know.
If you weren't curious about this world and especially the human condition.
Yeah.
And what makes us who we are. I mean, that's that's why I love it. Yeah, I mean that's it.
As long as we're not going to be a society soon that is only curious in so-called celebrities, you know what I mean? This idea, if your social media is your only real kind of what you're feeding off this junk food of social media, and all you're seeing is celebrities and so-called influencers, and then you decide to go into the quote arts because of that.
But that's
your food.
That's always been around. Yeah, it's that world on steroids now, you might say, but that is the progression of modernity. And there's always been celebrity magazines. There's always been, the Valentinos and
that's right.
And the
it was even worse in a way back then.
Yeah, I mean, Babylon is a crazy version of it, but it really kind of showcases that it's always been there.
Yeah,
and there will always be a place for them. And we talk about social media and all that stuff, but there'll be another version 20 years from now of that. But I Ari Aster was just saying that. And a lot of great filmmakers say this, that like cinema is dying. But then you have Chris Nolan championing against it and proving everyone wrong with Oppenheimer in a way.
Yeah.
I think there will always be a place for great artists in cinema and in storytelling. Let's just say storytelling, because cinema Ari might be right. Cinema might be dying. Theater died in a way, and now lives on in a niche form. Cinema might go the same way, but there will always be storytellers, and there will always be actors in some form.
Yeah,
and even the form changes. I mean, you look at actors from 50 years ago. Yeah. The style has changed, the form has changed, and it will continue to change.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important, again, to be curious as an actor. And to also be dynamic as an actor, to change with the trends. And going back to the education thing, I think that's a problem, because it's living, you're still, nothing wrong with learning Stanislavski, but that is a style from over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not, things have changed. And if you don't acknowledge the change, then you're doomed.
Yes.
Because it has to go with the change of society.
Yes.
So I think you have to, like I said, I love Brecht. I found him kind of in college. I really was into Peter Brook in college, and I think he did stuff. But even those people who I love and respect and think were innovative in their time are still now in the past.
Right.
And you can take inspiration from them and you can take lessons from them, but you also have to compile on new lessons. And it's up to us who are actively doing it to find those changes and find a way to explain it to people.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about when you started to realize that you have a way of doing this, particularly for the camera? Mm-hmm. And it went from, being scared, doing the work, to I have what, for better word, a process now. Mm-hmm. I have a way of doing it. And what has changed in this over time? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it, usually. Yeah, so like I said, when I came into this, I knew nothing. I had the basics of acting, and I had the tools of acting school. And I would rely on a lot of that just because I had no process and I had no awareness at the time. Mm-hmm. And, I remember when I first got here, I would break the beats down in my script the way you're taught in college because I just had nothing else to go on. And even though for me that wasn't necessarily helpful, it felt like I was working. Right. It felt like I was doing work.
And sometimes you need just that.
Something like that. Yeah. Looking back on it, a lot of it was wasted energy because it didn't elicit any sort of anything. Yeah. But it was something to do. Yeah. It made me feel like I was an actor. Yeah. In quotation marks. Then, through luck, I guess, or through inherent ability and not being a total lunatic, I started to get, I fell kind of, I say ass backwards into getting cast and stuff. So I was cast in a short film for a Columbia grad student. And that was kind of the first film I did. And I showed up doing all that shit, like the beats and like intention and blah, 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 blah. And then I did a TV show. I got like a one-line role in this Dick Wolf short-lived thing called Conviction. And, it's so different when you show up in front of the camera because it's just different than theater. Like it's so different. And I did it. But in the process, I didn't realize like how bad I was. But like you look back on it, and I felt it at the time. But like all that nonsense was getting in the way of like just being present and listening. Like it was like, okay, because I wrote down punching is my intention in this beat, it's gonna be there. Yeah. But it's like, no, it won't be there. Just because you wrote something doesn't mean it will be there. You got to be present. You got to be listening. Right. You got to do it. Right. But I didn't get that, and like when I showed up to do that Conviction role, and the camera was right in front of me the first time on TV, like the lines were gone because like you go to that white space because it's so. So then you start to realize that all the shit you were taught, there's more to it, right? Mm-hmm. And then with time and experience, being around other actors and seeing how they did it, I started to realize like you kind of have to find your own way into it. Over time, you get more comfortable. Over time, you get to watch yourself more because you have more body work on film, and you start to see what works and what doesn't work. I did have a teacher who was very helpful in getting the idea, because what you have to do is kind of get out of your own way. Mm-hmm. Too many actors get in their way. Mm-hmm. They muscle it. They feel like they have to do all the shit that you don't need to do, instead of just listening and being present. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, I'm watching, movies and TV and realizing that what the acting I respond to is just honest. Yeah. It's not reaching. It's not histrionics. It's not like all this other shit. Some people love that. Yeah. Some people want to be that kind of actor. Some people thrive in that type of acting. That's not what I respond to, and that's not what I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. So then I guess I'd been just kind of like painting by numbers for some years, and still being lucky enough to work on film, start to build a career, but not like sort of transcending to like the next place,
right?
Understanding the kind of mysticism, as we were saying, about this. Then I met this kind of he's an acting teacher. His name was Howard Guskin. He wrote this book, How to Stop Acting, which is kind of ironic because he's teaching it academically. But I had the good fortune, he directed this film, and it was with me and Jim Gandolfini, first time I worked with Jim. He was just fresh off The Sopranos, Famke Janssen. Anyway, we did this film, this really indie film that his wife Sandra Jennings wrote. And I was working with Harold, who basically is teaching the style that even when I started to learn that style, like I still was doing it too academically, but really it's about like he would say, like, let you feel the kind of click, or like let you find whatever, like let it click. Don't feel like you have to rush the line. Just like until you feel something, don't do it, basically. And for a long time, it didn't register with me what he meant, but it was basically getting out of your own way, just listening, responding, like almost doing nothing, almost don't do anything. And then working with him alongside Jim, who was the master at that. Watching Jim Gandolfini work was like, because I'd been such a fan for so long, and I was like, this guy, it's like an animal. He just is there, and he just responds, and there's no expectation. And like Jim would, I guess, sometimes say, like, he'd look at a line, he's like, well, I don't have nothing. And Harold would be like, that's okay. Nothing is something. Like, then just play that. Like, just do it. Just say it. Just speak. And once I understood that like you don't always have to have a beat with an intention and this and that and blah, blah. Like, it's okay to not know.
Yeah.
Once I understood that, it was so liberating.
Oh God, I imagine.
And at that point, everything changed for me. And I still, Harold has since passed. His wife is still around, and she's kind of a mentor to me now. We talk and we toss ideas around when I'm working on a script, and it's just a liberating style of acting because it is so free, and it then all of a sudden I was allowed to find inspiration from anything. That's when it all changed. And then I started to do more leading role. That's when I did this film, Not Fade Away, which was kind of like my first big leading role studio movie.
Did that Gandolfini job lead to that?
No, it was totally unrelated. Wow. I was actually cast in Not Fade Away before Jim was cast. Oh. And then he came in, and it was so nice because some years had passed, and I was getting more confident as an actor, even though I've come, I feel like, a long way since then. But at least I felt like I was now on the right track of an actor, understanding how to let just like the universe come in, be open to whatever happens, be free. Yeah. Even on that job, I wasn't as free as I have gotten now, but I was going that way. And it was great to see Jim come back, and it was another chance to work with him. There's a scene in that movie where we sit across from each other in a restaurant, and we have this scene, and he really he was so free, and he was so another thing I learned from him was like to help push and better another actor. There's this line in it where he's basically saying he's gonna leave my mom, in like he might leave the mother, and like basically they would get divorced and run off with this other lady, and he says, what would she do? Like, that's the question he asked me, and then I say, I don't know. I would take care of her. I think that's how I respond. And he sensed that I wasn't there, and he just kept asking the line over again. What would you do? What would you do? What would you? And like every time giving me a chance to say it until he saw it click. And that vulnerability hit, and what was needed for that. And that's a skill that now when I work with younger actors, I emulate. Like if I know that they're not there, like I try and just ask again and again. And that's one of those little tricks anyway. But like, and since then I've just gotten more and more free, kind of not give a shit in a way. And it just has progressed since then to get as honest. My endless struggle is for utter honesty on film. And that's what I keep striving for. Yeah.
And just to be clear, because I don't think anybody is unclear about this, but I just want to make sure. You have to lay a foundation. That's why you're talking about all this kind of stuff. Where
I don't know why I'm talking about it. I'm just spitting this shit out.
But we're getting it. But it's not like you're just showing up without laying foundations within yourself about this character and then just saying, I'm going to just be present, right? Because all of the stew that you create is still working in there, and then you become present on the set.
Yeah.
Right? If you didn't have the stew, though, it would be like, isn't there something lacking?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think every actor is different.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are actors who can just go and they're right there.
Yeah.
Like they don't need anything.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are. But for me, I find value in all this stuff. It's hard to say because I don't, I can't, it's like you can't shoot the same movie twice where you do it that way and then you do it without
and then see the differences.
So you can't see the difference. So just objectively, I can't, answer that question. I just know what I like to do. And I think that's what's important for an actor to realize is what they like, what they find helpful for them. Whether that's doing it this way, that way, whatever works. I guess I always knew I needed something in advance. Whether it was doing those beats, whether it was doing it this way, it was something I felt it let me feel like a little more comfortable, I guess. And I think, if you have the luxury as an actor, you might get to explore different options and realize what works and what doesn't work. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, because this is a game where you can get thrown to the side very quickly, you might experiment with the wrong thing and not have the luxury to pivot.
Yeah.
But for me, I guess I always needed some sort of base ahead of time. But what is also vital is when you show up, especially on film, when you show up on the day, you got to put all that stuff on the back burner or kind of behind you, because when the camera's rolling, you can't be like, oh, let me draw all this stuff up. It's a business and there's a time, we got to make our day. You can't just be like, okay, now I need to go and do all my beat work, and now I got to go listen to this song 6 times to get into the mood, and I got to look at these pictures and cook a stew or whatever. But you can't do that then. It's too late. You're there, so you better just do it.
Yeah.
So I guess the idea is being, it's like, a Boy Scout going on a camping trip. You put everything into your bag just in case.
Yeah. Hopefully you won't need to take any of that out.
Yeah.
Right. You've worked with some amazing directors. Can you talk about the kind of directorial approach that works best for you? And if you have come upon it yet, or if you've come upon aspects of it in someone, and describe that. Or you can also do it in a negative way, meaning talking about all the ones that did not work.
Yeah. There isn't one way. It's funny. I think back. I had this meeting with Cameron Crowe years ago, right after I Did Not Fade Away, and he asked me he asked me 2 questions: what my process was, and also what he likes and what I like in a director. And I had no clue. I answered a lot of bullshit, but I didn't know, because I was like, I don't even know what my process is, and I don't know what I like in a director. So now I guess I feel more confident in answering that, but it's still not like a definite, rock solid answer. I think directors, like actors, have strengths and weaknesses. I don't think there is a perfect as I'm talking about working with actors, perfect director in the world. Just like for directors, there's probably not a perfect actor. They have flaws. The good thing about filmmaking is, you go to a whole nother step of editing, and you get to hide a lot of these things.
Yeah.
Your faults as a director, their faults as an actor. What I find valuable in directors is when they have a clarity, when they don't over-explain. Sometimes it just takes a look. I find now with directors, if they give me a note, they're like I already get, usually now I already get what they, like what I did, what they didn't like about it.
Yeah.
So they don't need to go on like some diatribe about explaining it in this. The worst thing you can do is explaining it in the story. They can and in this scene and blah, 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 and because of this and that, and it's like, no. Like, I think a lot of directors are taught in school, and we are taught as actors, like, don't say like faster. Don't say like angrier. Yeah. But quite frankly, that works.
I know.
And it's economic too. Like, I guess if you're working with an actor younger actors, it might be harder. But like nowadays, like, I'd rather you just be like that. Like, I don't need to go into some like intellectual, subconscious, blah, blah, blah. Like, by now, when you're on set, you should, as an actor, should understand all that shit about your character. Or if you don't, at least fill in the gaps on your own. Like, make it up. Because you got to have something. So I think clarity, concise direction is valuable. Kindness, support, because actors are, we're vulnerable. And that doesn't mean like coddling, and that doesn't mean lying, but it also means, actors can, a lot of the time, have to be very vulnerable. They're putting themselves out there. And it's a scary thing. And most of us are pretty sensitive. Like, I'm sensitive to criticism. I get depressed. I'm depressed. I have anxiety and I have depression. So when people are mean about what I do, it affects me. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, it hurts my feelings. But because we're sick and we're masochistic, I guess, we put ourselves through it. So yes, you want, in this collaboration, you want your director to be supportive of you and feel like they want you there. One of the best people about that is Todd Haynes. Todd Haynes is like, he makes you feel, and he's such a, he's a brilliant filmmaker. He's an icon. And even if you're playing the smallest part in a movie of his, he makes you feel so supported. And like, you can do no wrong. And even if you are doing wrong, he has a way to explain it to you in a supportive way. And I've been lucky to mostly work with directors like that. Kelly Reichardt, she's not like the warmest person, but she makes you feel like you're on a team with her. And she collaborates with you, and she's no nonsense, which I really appreciate and respect. The best ones, like Adam McKay is just like, loves like to play. You feel very at home playing on his set. Celine is like so compassionate and loving of her actors, Celine Song. And they all do their best not to get in your way. They trust their actors too. They hired you for a reason and they trust you. Now the worst ones get in your way. They over-explain. They aren't supportive.
And some of the people...
and really what it comes down to a lot of times is that they don't trust themselves, or they don't trust the writing, They don't trust what is on the page. They don't trust what's on the page. Like, I did something recently, and you could sense that the director didn't trust the scene or what was on the page, and kept asking us to reach for something that wasn't there because he felt like the scene would be boring otherwise. And it's like, well, you're making this movie. You wrote this. If you don't trust it, then why are we doing this? Like, we can't reach for things that aren't there just because you feel like, clearly you feel like this isn't dramatic or dynamic enough. Then cut the fucking scene.
Yeah.
Like, or cut the lines. I don't know what to tell you, but like, you can't make an artificial thing happen if it's not there.
Right.
But yeah, so those are kind of the qualities, I think.
Do you actually say that though? Do you speak out?
No, that's not. No. I mean, this is why actors get it, because you'll fight back a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you have a good director, usually you come to some sort of collaboration and compromise. I did another movie a year ago where it was me and this wonderful actress. I won't say because I want to say like this movie it is, but we were at this kind of last scene in the movie, and we were all. It was like the actors. It became kind of the actors versus the director, because we didn't understand why we would say these things. And like, this is stereotypical for actors, but it's good when you can have this conversation, because ultimately it usually makes the film better.
Right.
And it took a really long time. Probably we weren't shooting because we were having this conversation, but eventually we came to an understanding because the director was willing to be open to this stuff instead of being like, you have to say what's written. Right. You have to say that you're doomed, because the actor kind of has control too. Right. And it's never going to be good if the actor isn't buying it.
And why not ask the person that has been living with this character, that is developing this character, and that might have a really interesting say in this to make this better? You have
to. I think something that has changed, we were talking about changing in this world, is this isn't, a writer nowadays I don't think can treat themselves as like Shakespeare or Tennessee Williams or whatever, unless they're doing a hyper stylized thing where the language is so vital. But if you're trying to reach for kind of modern realism on film, you have to be open to shifting dialogue, to changing things. And like Kelly Reichardt, one of the best, is like we were doing Showing Up, and we're doing a scene with Michelle Williams and I, and Kelly will cut lines and cut things. And at one point, Michelle was like, "Are you sure you want to cut all this stuff?" But she's like willing to. She sees what's happening in the scene, and she's willing to move. And that's a great thing about film, is that you can see it, see what's working, and change. Yeah, it isn't,
it's part of the director job. Yeah.
And I think a director has to be willing to do that. You can't just sit there and be like, the words I wrote in isolation, 3 years ago, have to stay here on the day. That you're fucking yourself if you do that.
Yeah.
If you can't acknowledge it's not necessarily working, and you can make it better by collaborating on the day, then you're gonna fuck the film.
Yeah, right. How does it feel to be central in a scene that people now are going to, for the rest of time, say, when someone asks them what scene makes them cry, it's going to be a scene that you are in. And central in that scene.
Yeah.
I think that this year, over and over and over
about
again.
Big George Foreman when I was drunk and spilling my
I shouldn't have
wine.
laughed like this. I should have kept that going. But you know what I mean? Like, when people, I can almost cry right now thinking of that scene. Okay, we're talking about the end of Past Lives. I haven't shown my wife this movie yet. She's a crier, and that's and then I want to be able to ask her in that moment, why are you crying? Why? What is it right now? Because I think it's...
I just did another interview about a week ago, a little more than that, but they were talking about that scene, and I asked the interviewer, like, why did you? Because I'm curious about that too.
Yeah.
Because I think people cry for different reasons in that scene, which is really cool. Because a lot of times people, when you cry in a movie, you're all crying for the same reason.
Right.
So that's interesting you said that.
And that's an interesting thing about what she has made here, I think, because it has that. For me, it's very complicated because I think it's also different for married people.
Sure. Of course, yeah.
Because you don't know, right, what's going to happen. Because in dumb movies, right, the most absurd things happen, right? And the person leaves a marriage or something like that. Not necessarily that's absurd, but in the context of Past Lives, that would be absurd. Like,
exactly. 2 days, and she's like, "Okay, I'm going to run off with you." Like, that's absolutely insane.
But it's almost. But here's what I'm positing here. Some people are crying because they're happy that this is not that movie.
that this is not it's not, they're almost crying over the art of it. That it's ending with this.
Interesting. It's an interesting scene because I think people cry for different reasons.
Yeah.
And to me, that's cool. Yeah.
There has been much said about the kind of restrictions that Celine put on you, keeping you away from Teo.
Yeah.
Wanting this meeting that you to perform in the movie to actually be the first time you two as humans meet. And the assumption is that there is going to be something there mystically as well that we're capturing. And you know, I have been a person who has always thought stuff like this should be applied more by directors. But lately, through this podcast, I have had the thought that I don't know if I would do something like this anymore, because I feel like, and you tell me how this is wrong or it didn't apply in this case, I feel like that's almost saying to the actor, I don't trust you as an actor to act. I want this to occur, and I could understand applying this to people who are not professionals because we don't trust that they're going to be able to do this moment. Did you feel that?
Well, so, you know, we've talked a lot about this in the press and as the award season has gone on. This wouldn't, you know, Celine is not a dictator.
Yeah.
This wouldn't have happened if we weren't willing to do it or wanting to do it. And quite frankly, it started as sort of like, you know, these things become mystical as we talk about them in the awards campaign. Things get like elevated and blown up, and it's cool. But like, it really started as kind of, we were here at this table. You were in my house. At this table, we were having dinner. Her and her husband were here, and we were sort of like, she's like brought it up, and we're tossing it around as like a cool idea. And I was like down for it. I was like, yeah, that's cool. Let's do that. Not knowing that we would actually be able to do it. But because Celine is so tenacious, she was able to get her crew and everyone on board doing it. Now, a big reason it doesn't happen, I think, is because it's hard, especially in indie film, to facilitate that. You know, you don't have a lot of resources. You have one makeup trailer. You have one, they call it triple banger trailer, where like all three of us are basically in a trailer. So to like make sure I'm out the door and Teo comes in and, you know, and the office and like that's hard. That takes extra work. That takes a PA dedicated to that.
Yeah.
And when you're in the actual function of making a movie, people don't necessarily have time to make sure that that happens. But our crew was so great, so motivated, so on board with what we were doing that they were happy to facilitate it. So it was cool. We did it.
Yeah.
And you know, it works on film. Not to say it wouldn't have worked if we didn't do that, but if you have the luxury of doing it, why not do it? You know? Like, why not do it? I get what you're saying about makes you feel like that director doesn't trust you, but that's why I think it has to be collaborative.
Yeah.
If a director came to me and was like, we are doing this, I would be a lot more resistant and be like, I agree with you. I would. There is a way of doing that where I would feel like, well, what the fuck? You don't trust me as an actor? Like, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
So it's delicate.
Yeah.
And Celine did it the right way.
But you know what else that would mean to me if I was you? I'd be like, oh man, there's a lot of pressure on this first take.
I mean, you know what? I felt that way on that take.
Yeah.
There was pressure because we're like, okay, we only get this once.
Right. A lot of people put time and effort into this.
So I did feel that way. And again, luckily it worked.
Yeah.
If it didn't work, it would have been a lot of nonsense for nothing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we did shoot that scene multiple, you know, we shot not many, but several takes of it.
And I'm sure there's still.
I'd be curious to see the other takes and how different they are.
And I'm sure they're not that much different because it's not like that much has changed from that just shaking hands.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, and also if we had met, if it would have, that's
Right.
again going back to this. You do it once, so at the end of the day, it becomes a cute story.
Right.
To tell. These are these. That's really what it becomes.
Yeah.
The mysticism of it is hard to. You can't objectively say because you only did it one way.
Yeah.
Like we can't say if it would have been just as impactful.
Yeah.
But what you do get is a cute story to go around to interviews and award shows and be like, we did that.
Yeah.
Look at it. And I think here we go. I'm gonna poo-poo method acting for a minute. But like, I think. At the end of the day, method actors, it becomes about that story. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily about much else besides having this crazy story about how you did it.
Yeah.
And you get to go to the TV show and talk about that. And
right.
Becomes a mythology people talk about.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it makes someone a better actor.
Right.
At times I think it's quite selfish to other actors and to crews. But that's a lot of this. Past the like just the acting, but the selling of a story, selling of a movie becomes about these things.
Right. Right. That are necessary.
Because that intrigues people.
Tiny mythologies, yes.
A little mythology to it.
Yeah. Did you, because she's this is her first film, were the actors kind of taking on this extra protectiveness of her on a set? You know what I mean? Or this kind of idea that we have to make sure she's okay.
Interesting. I never thought about that. But I don't know. I can't really speak for the other actors. I don't know. But there were things that I felt, now looking back, that I guess I was a little protective of her.
That means she did a really good job if you're not even aware of this. That means that she was so strong as a director.
It's not our job to be protective of the director.
No.
Like, that's not, I've worked with a lot of first-time directors and...
Oh, even in first-time directors, you mean?
I think that's what you're asking.
No, but I'm saying... I thought you meant in general it's not your job to be protective of it.
In general.
Yeah.
But I'm saying also, and I've worked with other first-time directors.
Interesting,
and I haven't felt as protective of... I don't know if it was protective. I just think we were buddies.
Yeah.
And like we cared about each other. Like there was a friendship forming and I cared about her or I care about her. And...
But did you ever see
everyone was on board, even like the first.
That's good.
The first AD. Sometimes the ADs are, they're not. But Ben was like really Shab, our cinematographer.
Yeah.
I think what it was more about is everyone really believed in the story.
That's good. Yeah.
And I think when you have crews and actors who don't believe in the story, maybe it happens less.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes a chore and a slog, and you're sort of like, well, fuck the direct, like fuck them.
Yeah.
Like they're not.
Yeah.
But she's so compassionate and loving of her people around her. Celine's very touchy. She loves to hold hands and hug, and so she's very like warm. And I think that makes the other people around her also sort of, you say protective, but I think it's just like a family or a team or whatever.
You're at a nice place. Right now, a film you just did is nominated for Best Picture. That's pretty, that's pretty darn good. And you can look around. You have nice relationships with exceptional directors that a lot of actors would like. That's their goal. When you're sizing up this and you're looking at your career, what are you setting your sights on in terms of what you now would want? Maybe it's a role, maybe it's just a relationship, another kind of relationship with collaborators. Could be either director or actors, or maybe it's something that has nothing to do with the camera. I don't know. When you think about what the next phase is that you want to see yourself go into, what describe that?
It's hard. Again, it changes, and I think what I would want is I would want indie films to be able to make more money and have a mark. Like, I like doing what I do. What I don't like is that we don't make much money doing it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of work and it's hard and there's not a lot of reward to it. So like when you have something like Past Lives break through and get nominated for an Oscar, that's rare. You know, I've done a lot of indie films, and for an indie film to make it this far, that's really, and Past Lives isn't even necessarily a true indie. It had A24 behind it. Mm-hmm. So like, you know, all these people out there making true indies where they got to sell it, it's a lot of work for a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
I wish the world would change and those movies could have more of an impact, because they're really special and they're great and they take a lot of heart. So it's up to the world to change. But I don't think that's happening. I mean, yes, I would like, it's not about the role. I like the movies that I get to do, but I would like also, I want more money, man. I want stability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a shame that in this business, it seems like the only real ways to make money are things that at times are kind of soul crushing.
Right.
You know,
right.
Movies that like I have a hard time muscling up the energy to like, you know, to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I get scripts or sides for them, I'm like, you know, that's why it's nice that like you have something like Oppenheimer where it's the old way of film.
Yeah.
I mean, although it's new, the way he does it,
mm-hmm.
it's not, you know, it's based on a book.
Yeah.
It's not you know, it's not an IP. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. If I told you that
it's
a biography of Oppenheimer was going to make $1 billion,
I know,
okay?
right?
And just you know.
I know, it's crazy, but that's a glimmer of hope. I hope there can be more of those, because that would be fantastic. That like doing movies like that on that level that's a dream.
Yeah.
But I don't know where this business is going. I don't know what's going to happen. And more times than not, I'm discouraged by this business and where it is going. But I'm in too deep now. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not pivoting. You know, like I've started producing. I've started to you know, do things like that. And that's cool, but it puts you in the same, I'm in the same boat. I'm not producing, you know, Marvel movies. Right. I'm producing like little indies. Yeah. So I'm in the same boat I was as an actor.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. I just hope that there will continue to be a place for movies like this, like the ones I make. And I continue to hope that they make some money, and that I'm able to keep a roof over my head and, you know, support my family. And because that's what it is. Once you have a family and you have a kid, things change a lot. You know, I got to worry about my daughter now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. You might see me on a CSI soon. I don't know. It really depends. Like I would have 10 years ago would say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right. Right.
But I'm a human being, and I have responsibilities.
This is you're making me think it's a sad state of affairs where someone who doesn't want to has to now do that.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. It's a luxury problem. Like I'd be still very fortunate. I'm not saying, and there is a place for things like that.
But I'm not even saying. I'm saying to have a steady, reliable income, not like you used to be like, I want the big bucks now. Yeah. You're not even saying that.
Oh no. This is just so you have a steady income.
That's what I'm saying.
You're not you know, buying a vacation house in you know, Fiji. You're keeping your roof over your head. You're putting your kid maybe through college. I mean, I see it. You know, one thing I really love about being a New York actor is that New York's expensive. It's a hard city to make it in. It's a hard city to live in. But the actors here, for the most part, are, you know, working class. And obviously the word working class in New York is very different than working class where I grew up. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a different set of income, but it's also a lot more expensive here, right? But these are people who are living very normal lives in New York. They're workers. They show up on set. They work hard. They care about it. It's not this like glamour in this, profession. It's not all this other stuff. But it's kind of the world I grew up in. Just blue collar, working class type people. And although obviously here, like I said, it's different. It's a different set of circumstances, different incomes. It's still not like, private jets and caviar every night. It's work. Yeah. It's work. And I love that. I do. I don't. I have. It would be a dream, obviously, to have personal assistants and like all that stuff. But I don't know if I'd be comfortable. I don't know if that's not what I'm from. That's not what I'm used to. But yes, I would like some stability, more stability. And I really hope that there is a place for these kinds of movies. There continues to be a place for them. Yeah.
John Magaro, thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Good talking.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.